Breaking news today. Ukraine could never be a part of NATO. It's all thanks to Russia, really. On September 30, 1990, I joined tens of thousands of Ukrainians in Kyiv as we chanted, "No to the Soviet Union," and other pro-independence slogans. Ukrainians told me harrowing stories of life under Kremlin rule as I conducted interviews with them in Russian, the language they had been forced to learn as children. Protesters reflected on the Great Famine of the early 1930s, when Soviet dictator Joseph Stalin's forced agricultural collectivization in what had been the breadbasket of Europe killed 4 million Ukrainian peasants. Not even the most zealous Ukrainian nationalists could have predicted that 15 months later, the Soviet Union would collapse and Ukraine would gain full independence, becoming the second largest European country by landmass overnight after only Russia itself. No one also foresaw that within a generation of gaining independence from the Soviet Union, Ukraine would be lobbying to join NATO, the Western military alliance formed by the United States during the Cold War to counteract Soviet expansion in Europe. Almost doubling in size since 1999, NATO now includes 14 formerly Soviet republics and other countries formerly part of the Soviet bloc in Eastern Europe. Finland became the 31st member of NATO this past April, after decades of maintaining a policy of military neutrality. Nonetheless, a string of post-Soviet leaders have warned that Ukrainian membership would be unacceptable because it would bring NATO to Russia's doorstep, give Western powers a threatening perch along the 1,200-mile border between the two countries, and grant access to the key Black Sea port of Odessa. Among them, Vladimir Putin stood out as the most decisive. He has ruled Russia since 2000, with the exception of a 4-year period during which his trusted advisor Dmitry Medvedev served as interim president. In 2005, Putin made headlines by dubbing the dissolution of the Soviet Union the greatest geopolitical catastrophe of the 20th century. He then warned that the accession of Ukraine to NATO would pose a direct threat to Moscow 3 years later. When Ukrainian nationalists began pushing for membership in the Western Alliance 6 years after his warning, he invaded the Crimean Peninsula and annexed a sizable chunk of southern Ukraine. Putin might have gotten away with his military aggression if he had stopped there. His bold land grab was criticized by Western leaders, led by Presidents Barack Obama and then Donald Trump, but they were hesitant to directly confront the Kremlin strongman. On February 24, 2022, that all changed with the invasion of Ukraine by Russian troops. Putin called it a country that never had stable traditions of real statehood, and he proceeded to launch a brutal air and land assault to take it over completely. But he, like many other great power leaders before him, overestimated his ability to quickly crush Kyiv and the rest of Ukraine. Ukrainians have instead remained unwavering. Ukrainian soldiers and civilians have resisted Russian incursions, retaken stolen land, and inflicted massive casualties on the invaders under President Volodymyr Zelensky's World War II-era reprisal of Winston Churchill. Putin's ill-conceived gamble, however, has made the seemingly impossible a reality. Due to Article 5 of the NATO Treaty, which states that an attack on one is an attack on all, if Ukraine were a member of NATO, the other signatories would be obligated to provide direct military aid in the event of an attack on Ukraine. The United States and its allies have been slowly but surely welcoming Ukraine into the NATO family. NATO member Poland has begun delivering MiG-29 fighter jets to Ukraine, following the shipment of the same planes to that country by NATO member Slovakia, which joined in 2004. Britain and Germany, two founding members of NATO, started sending tanks in March. Despite a number of public statements to the contrary, President Joe Biden made an unexpected visit to Kyiv in February, and the United States has transferred $46 billion in military assistance, including ships, Abrams tanks, anti-aircraft missiles, and advanced radar systems, since the Russian invasion. Washington also helps train soldiers to use the sophisticated equipment on the battlefield, which is arguably more important. On June 3, the leaders of the 9 newest NATO members issued a statement urging the alliance to increase aid to Ukraine and to expedite Ukraine's formal membership. All of these countries are former Soviet republics or Soviet bloc nations. They were making a statement in anticipation of the NATO summit in Vilnius, Lithuania, next month. Russia is pursuing a bloody occupation that will fail the longer it invades its neighbor, and the closer the Kremlin will be forced to face its worst nightmare, full Ukrainian membership in NATO.